We're holding Sif Tesvav in Shulchan Aruch. The next couple of Sifim, Sif Tesvav, Tezayin, Yud Zayin, Yud Ches, and Yud Tes, have to do with the sugya of Dina Demalchusa Dina, which is its own sugya. Obviously, it's related to Hilchos Gezeilah and Geniva, and we'll explain how in a minute. But it's a big, big sugya on its own, and really, it's one of the most relevant and prevalent sugyas. We're talking about Chesh and Mishpat, business halacha, uh, any type of interpersonal dispute, and even without a dispute, even when you go out on the street and you drive and you stop at a red light and you pay taxes or whatever you do, whenever you interact with the Malchusa, with the government, so you're interacting with the sugi of Dina Demalchusa, and any question that we're gonna first have to ask: is there Dina Demalchusa? Is this that's relevant to this? And another a different sugya, but also again the same type of thing, a minig. Is there a minig that's related to this? Right now we're focusing on Dina Demalchusa. As we'll see, Dina Demalchusa progresses in a few stages and it has a few layers. Um, like I said, and here it's from Sifim Tesvav through Yotes. Today, I hope we got through Sif Tesvav and Tezayin, and then we'll progress slowly, step by step, to get through the sugya as it's presented in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. So first of all, how does Dina Demalchusa come in to Hilchos Gezeilah and Geniva? So the context is as follows. In the previous shiurim, we spoke about how it's forbidden to have hana from a stolen object. If it's something that's stolen, it's forbidden to buy it. It's forbidden to not even to buy it, to take it as a gift, to get a ride in a stolen car. Any type of hana from something that's stolen is forbidden. Then we progressed and we spoke about the Mishnah, the halacha in pertin mitevas hameichsin, that a tax collector is somebody who is considered to be, by definition, a gazlan, and therefore all the money that's in his box that was collected for taxes is becheskas gzeila. The Gemara tells us, "Ein pertin mitevas hameichsin," not allowed to get change from a tevas hameichsin, from a box of a tax collector, because all that money is considered stolen. And we spoke about in the previous year what exactly is the definition of this hana and what isn't, and what ways it is permitted, what ways it isn't. That's a different discussion that we spoke about in the previous year. Now, we're going to take a step back, and the Gemara takes it's the first question the Gemara asks. Before we get into these halachas, what is hana, what is not hana, what is permitted, what's that? Tevas hameichs and a tax collector, why is it considered gazela? So this is the Gemara in Bava Kama Daf Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Beis. The Mishnah says ein pertim tevas hameichsin. This is the halacha we discussed last time. And the Gemara says over here, if you're looking on the screen, it's the second line. The Gemara starts in the second line of the Gemara. It's one line of the Gemara. The Mishnah says umeichsin. Correct the Gemara of Amar Shmuel Dina Demalchusa Dina. Why is taxes? Why is a meichis, a tax collector, considered a gazlan, and all his money is considered stolen? Shmuel tells us Dina Demalchusa Dina. The dinim, the halachas, the laws of the malchus, of the government, are din, are halacha. They're binding. They're legitimate. The Torah recognizes that. So what's the problem with tevas hameichsin? Why is it considered gzeila? Dina Demalchusa Dina. So the Gemara answers, Amar Chanina Bar Kahana, Amar Shmuel, b'meichis she'en le kitzva. We're talking about over here You're right. Taka, a regular meichus, a regular tax collector, Dina Demalchusa Dina. It's not considered Gezeilah. That's legitimate. Why over here is it forbidden? Because meichus she'ein like kitzvah. We're not talking about a legitimate tax collector. We're talking about a tax collector she'ein like kitzvah who's collecting an indefinite amount. He collects however much he wants, whatever he decides. That is not considered Dina Demalchusa Dina. That is stam Gezeilah. But a regular meichus, a regular tax collector, would be Dina Demalchusa Dina. The Gemara gives another answer. A self-appointed tax collector. Self-appointed tax collector is not coming as a representative of the Malchus, a representative of the king, just a bully and a robber who's taking money from people in the name of, you can call it taxes, but it's obviously not. This is, yeah, they're in the fresh state. This is not taxes. This is Gzela. So the main point over here is that we have a statement, Amar Shmuel, Dina Demalchusa Dina. Shmuel, you know, Hilchos Shmuel Bedini. Shmuel was the big Cheshen Mishpat Rav in the Gemara, and the halacha follows Shmuel in every case by dinim, by Cheshen Mishpat. The truth is, no one argues with Shmuel. And this statement of Shmuel, Dina Demalchusa Dina, appears in 6 or 7 places in Shas. Here's obviously one of them. This is a statement, and it's a statement, like I mentioned, that no one argues with. However, even though the statement itself, the halacha itself, Dina Demalchusa Dina, no one argues with, we find in Rishonim many different malachim, many different approaches to understanding the rationale of Dina Demalchusa Dina. Why is Dina Demalchusa Dina? We're not going to go through all of them. It's not all other Rishonim, it's not so clear how they learn and what they mean, and you can go this way or that way. If you really want to make a different shitta out of everyone, you can come up with 6 or 7 different shittas. But Bechlalos, there are 2 main shittas that we're going to talk about. Number 1 is the Ran. The Ran is a Maseches Nedarim, Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph. The Ran says as follows. What's the Gemara? But there also mentions this klal, this halacha Dina Demalchusa Dina, and the Ran explains why. Because all of the land belongs to the king. And the king could say to his to people who live in his land, if you don't do what I want, I'll kick you out. Basically, it's rent. That's the underlying principle according to the Ran is rent. If I own a house and somebody rents my house, I can ask them to do certain things, and if not, I have the right to kick you out. So to the king who owns the land has the right to tell the people to do what he wants, and definitely to pay taxes, which is basically rent. And if not, not. However, okay, we'll leave the Ran aside for now. We'll get back to the Ran a little bit later. There are Shabam, it's also on the screen, presents a slightly different explanation. And he says as follows. There are Shpam, again, as in Bava Basra, Daf Nandal, the base. There were a maskal of Ha'omer Shmuel, Dina Demalchusa Dina, and the same statement. And the Rashbam says, Kol misim va'arnoinius, all taxes and different type of taxes or tolls or fees. Umin hagis shal mishpetei hamelachim, and any other customs or laws of the king, shergilim lahanhig v'malchusam, that they're accustomed to enact in their kingdom. Dinahu, it's considered a din. Shakol b'nei hamalchus mekablam aleim irtzoinam chukei hamelach u'mishpatav, because all of the members of the malchus accept upon themselves willingly the king's laws. So, in other words, what's the Rashbam saying? This a completely different Nakoda than the Ran. The Ran is saying the king owns the land, and therefore, because he owns the land, he has the right to make certain demands and to enact certain laws. The Rashbam is saying it's not because if the king owns the land that the king doesn't own the land. It's because the members of the country accept upon themselves the king's rulership. There are a lot of nafkaminas between these two mahalchim, but the simplest nafkamina is, does Dina Demalchusa Dina apply in a democracy? Does the Dina Demalchusa Dina apply in the USA? According to the Iran, the Yesod of Dina Demalchusa Dina is that the government owns the land. The President of the United States or the Congress, they don't own the land. The land is privately owned. They own certain parts of the land, but it's not accurate to say that they own the land and therefore when you pay taxes, you're paying rent to the government for living on the land. No. However, if the yesod of Dina Demalchusa Dina is that kol misim v'arnonis u'minhagas shel mishpatei hamalachim kol bnei malchus mekablim aleim mertzaina, then it's a culture king from a king. If a king who's not who ascends to the throne on his own, no one asks him, no one elects him, and still we say that Dina Demalchusa Dina because the members of the country accept upon themselves mertzainim his laws. Alachas kama v'kama in a democracy where our government is elected by at least a majority of the votes. For sure, there is a legitimacy of Dina Demalchusa Dina. So based on this brief introduction and we'll speak about it more, like I mentioned in the beginning, as we progress through the discussion. But now let's look inside in the Alter B'Shulchan Aruch and Sif Tesvav. And says as follows: "V'kol zeh shahamoiches hu gazla." Everything we said in the previous halachas, when there are certain restrictions on being peirit mitevas hamoiches and taking change from the moiches's money box, it's talking about a moiches nachri. Oyafilu Yisrael she'amad me'elav shalei machmas hamelech, either a non-Jewish moiches, a non-Jewish tax collector, because we assume that he's collecting more than what he's legally allowed to, or even a yid, but he's he's not a representative of the king. He's not a tax collector who's coming to collect legitimate taxes according to the law. He's he's collecting, he's running his own show. These are not real taxes. There's no legitimacy over here of Dina Demalchusa. So there, or even if he's coming as a representative of the king, but in kitzvah, he has no set amount that a tax has to be something, has to be reasonable, has to be even if it's unreasonable, it has to be a set amount. This is how much tax I'm collecting. But if it's stam, it's lawless. Dina Demalchusa has to be based on a law. The law has to be that this is a certain amount of taxes that you pay. But if when there is ein kitzvah, when he collects however much he wants, that this is not Dina. So Shalakeach Masha Yirtzahu, he takes whatever he wants. So that is called not Dina Demalchusa, that's called Gazela. And all the restrictions that we learned about in the previous sifim of being peirit mitevas hamoiches and having hana from davar agazel, etc., they apply to this type of meiches. Aval meches shepasak eisei hamelech litel davar katzel. Sorry? But but if a tax that was enacted by the king for a fixed amount, and he appointed an honest Yiddish tax collector to collect it, and we know that this person is trustworthy, and he doesn't take for himself more than what the king is demanding. This person is not considered a gazlan, lefisha din hamalchus din, because Dina Demalchusa Dina. And if the king set up a certain tax, you're obligated al pi halacha to pay that tax. Because the entire land belongs to the king. And he's able to say that nobody's allowed to have hana for my land without paying my rent, without paying my the fixed amount that I am asking. And so too, not necessarily a king, but a nobleman in a village that he owns, or really belongs to the king, but he gave it to the nobleman b'matana. Therefore, one who evades this tax, over alay sigza. Somebody who evades a tax and that rightfully belongs to the king, doesn't matter if it's a Jewish king or a non-Jewish king. We already know you're not allowed to steal even from a guy. Now, over here, whose reason does the Alter Rebbe bring? The basis of Dina Demalchusa Dina over here is because the land belongs to the king. This is, I think over here it comes in the name of the Rush, but it's a similar idea to what the Ran said. However, as we'll see as we go on, it's not the only reason. And before we go on, one more point. The Ran that we mentioned earlier in the Darim, when he talks about Dina Demalchusa Dina, he concludes a line that is omitted in the most prints of the Gemara. And the newer reprinted ones, the Izvahadar, it's there in a footnote that they added in all the parts of Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, Ran, etc., that were taken out due to, it's called Hashmatas Hatzenzur, due to censorship. The Ran concludes a line. He says, even though the land belongs to the king, and you're obligated to pay taxes to the king, because the king has a right. The king has a right to charge these taxes, and not let us steal from a guy. Says the Ran, if you can get away with not paying, it's fine. Why? Because we already learned that even though Gazela from a guy is aser, hafkas halva from a guy is mutter. To withhold payment on a loan from a guy in a manner that's not going, if it's not, as long as it's not going to lead to chil Hashem, that's permitted. Says the Ran, Taka, you owe the money to the king, but it's a halva, it's a chayv. Hafkas halva is mutter. What did we just learn in the Alter Rebbe? That's not the case. He says it's not hafkas halva over loy sigzel. So now over here in the brackets, the Alter Rebbe is explaining why is it not hafkas halva, why is it loy sigzel. Even though a person is allowed to be mafkiach chayv, even though a person is allowed to withhold payment on a chayv that you owe to a guy, this is not called hafkas chayv. This is mamish gzeila. You're currently having hana. Hafkas chayv is something that happened already. Hafkas chayv is a guy lent me money last week. And now he comes to collect it, or not he comes to collect it. We learned earlier. He dies. His son, who's Bechlal, not even sure if the transaction ever happened, if the loan ever happened, he's coming to collect it. So then, if I can get out of it without making a chil Hashem, that's called afkas chayv. But if here it's not afkas chayv, you're right now I'm living on the king's property. Person the king could have sold this land to someone else. And now, coming another one. Besides the fact that right now you're living on the king's land and having hana from taking money from the king, and that's why it's not afkas chayv, it's mamish gezeilah. There's another reason. Hamelech muchsaku b'masha magia le'me'avadim. The king is muchsak. The king is considered to be already. The king is entitled to what he's supposed to get in taxes from his subjects. Why? Because his subjects, the members of that country, they agreed to accept him. And they resolved that he would be their adin, he would be their master, he would be their ruler, and they would be his servants. And everything they own is meshubad to the king's service. All the merchandise from which the taxes, the tolls, the tariffs that the taxes are paying from, this is sales tax. Yeah, the king takes taxes from business transactions, from merchandise. So all of this merchandise that you're doing business with is meshubah to the king. The king has a right to take taxes from this business. Okay, and it's as if it's already in the king's rishus. It's not afkas chayv. Afkas chayv means it's in my rishus, and it came into my rishus. Beheter came into my rishus in a permitted manner, and now I don't have to take it out of my rishus, give it back to the guy. But over here, it's in the king's rishus. Since the merchandise that the taxes are being charged on are in the king's land, they're in the king's country, and they're technically in the possession of the king's servant. And somebody who evades this tax is stealing the king's property that is already in the king's rishus. So that's the first shitta. That evading taxes is mamash an issa deraisa v'leisigzil. Comes Alter Rebbe and he says his second opinion. Yesh chilkin al zeh. There are those who disagree with this. Who disagrees? We already know. Theran. Umatirim lahavriach hamechas afal pishim emun alav Yisrael neman. And they allow somebody to evade taxes, even though it's a Dina Demalchusa Dina, and the person who's responsible for collecting the taxes is an honest Jew, because if it wasn't, anyway, it's Gazela, and we're not obligated to engage with that. But because he's collecting to a non-Jewish king, it's okay. That's considered afkas halva. That's what the Ran says. If the memuna, the person who's in charge of collecting the taxes, knows that you're trying to evade the taxes, you can't force him to pay the tax. Because al pi halacha, you're allowed to be mafkiya chayiv from a guy. If the tax collector is scared of the king, so then he's able to force whoever it is to pay. Okay, these are details. There's a machlokes. Are you allowed to, is evading taxes from a non-Jewish king Hafkas halva, or is it Gazela mamish? Hafkas halva by a guy is mutter, and Gazela is aser. What's the halacha? Says the Alter Rebbe, v'yirei shamayim yachmir la'atzmei kesvara harishena shlei laver aloisas hashabater. Yirei shamayim should be machmir like the first var, because according to the first var, it's mamish an isu deraisa of like sigzil. Now, I just want to add that we learned already that hafkas halva is only permitted if there's no possibility of chil Hashem. If there's a possibility of chil Hashem, not even those who permit that, even hafkas halva is aser. Nowadays, unfortunately, we know very well that evading taxes by a frum yid is invariably associated with the possibility of chil Hashem, and everyone would agree that it's not permitted. The shaila is only if it's an isur deraisa of chil Hashem, or it's an isur deraisa of leisigzil and of chil Hashem. That's number one. Number two is that a lot of today's achronim point out that besides for, as we mentioned already, that according to their Rashbam, Dina Demalchusa applies also in the United States, in a democracy, in a country, in any country where Hiskimu B'nei Medina on to accept the authority of the government, which is, again, if we're talking about a king who ascends the throne without being elected, alachas kam v'kama, that applies in a democracy, even if you don't like the government or disagree with certain policies. And just to emphasize, overwhelming majority of the Paiskim of the Gazela Paiskim from the last century agree with Pshitus that Dina Demalchusa applies in any democratic country. The Hilchos Gezeilah and Hilchos Gezeilah and Samech Tes says it based on the Rashbam we mentioned earlier, the Gersmeisha and a few Chuvas Pshitus and many more. There's a Sefer Dina Demalchusa, 800 pages long, but there he has a compilation of all brings down the whole discussion, everyone who paskins this way. But I just want to add another point that a lot of folks can point out, that we're talking about in the Malchusa, if paying taxes or evading taxes is like sigzil or zafkos halva, it was a shaila then about the king. The king takes money. Why the king take money? Because to fund his wars, or to build himself another palace, or stam. Yes, the king did do some things in return for the populace in exchange for the money. The king built roads, and the king protected the country, and things like that. But mostly, the taxes were going to the king's personal, to the king's pocket. What the king chose to do with them after, sometimes the king chose to build some roads. Nowadays, the taxes do not go to anyone's personal enrichment. That's a crime. Yeah, if somebody misappropriates tax funds for their personal enrichment, what do the taxes go? Taxes go for the benefit of society, whether it's federal taxes or local government taxes. So besides for the fact that there's a Dina Demalchusa issue, that you have a responsibility to the Malchus to pay taxes, there are also a lot of halachas that there are certain things that takanis that Bnei Medina have to do, have to contribute to for the benefit of a functioning society. So when we pay taxes, and our taxes go towards police and roads and other causes that are for the general benefit of society, then besides for the Dina Demalchusa Dina, there is an obligation to pay taxes, stam, because of Ben Adam L'Chaveri obligation of again, of participating in the functioning of society, Shivat V'Yair, and other types of halachas like that. Okay, let's finish the sif inside. If a Yid bought the rights for the rest of this halacha and sif tazayin, these halachas are not so relevant to the way taxes are collected nowadays, or we pay directly to the IRS. So we'll just read through them without too much extra commentary. If a Yid bought for himself the rights to collect taxes, a Yid bought for himself the right to collect taxes. For sure, you're not allowed to evade those taxes. The Yid now owns the right to those taxes, so to not pay it to him is just regular Gazela. But if a guy bought the rights of the taxes from the king, then everyone agrees that it's permitted to evade those taxes, because now you're not paying it to the king. You're paying it to a different guy who is not the king, who bought the rights to collect taxes from the king. Even if you know that the guy is he's not playing any games. He's collecting what the king said. But at this point, you're not stealing from the king. This is taka hafkas. Why is it different when you're evading taxes from a guy who bought the right to pay the taxes? That's called hafkas chayiv, and evading taxes from the king, that's called gzeila mamish and not hafkas alva. And we explained earlier why, because the king is muhsak. The king is muhsak in the money that's coming to him. So by taking it from him, needless to say, according to the first reason, that the king owns the land, so therefore it's not hafkas chayiv, it's gzeila mamish. That for sure doesn't apply to another guy who bought the rights. But even according to the second reason, that it's not because the king owns the land, it's because the king is muhsak in the money that comes to him. The king, and now the king sold the rights to someone else. Explains the Alter Rebbe, the king can only sell the rights to collect taxes. The king can't sell the chazaka, his being a muhsak. The king can't sell. His chazaka is mitzad himself, because he's the king and everyone is his subjects. So therefore, his being a muhsak stems as a result of that. Because again, the aside of this Dina Demalchusa is Kabbalah's Bnei Medina, Haskamas Bnei Medina. The Bnei Medina accepted the king, and didn't accept another guy who is not the king. It's a certain financial, there's a monetary chayv over here that he's able to sell. He says, you have the right to collect $1 million worth of taxes in my name, but the being a muhsak I can't sell. This money is a chayv, so to not pay it is of course chayv. Okay, Sif Tazayin, ukshakno Yisrael afilo neidashal lekech Yisrael mitzvah samelach. Just one more point, and this whole last parentheses over here. The reason why the Alter Rebbe goes into this whole erichus is because the Beis Yosef struggles to understand this in the Torah. The Torah brings these two halachas that to be mafkia taxes from the king is gzeila mamish, but from another guy it's mutter because tafkas chayv. The Beis Yosef has to steer him, and he really struggles. He gives a few answers that are deichik. The Acharonim don't like it. The way the Alter Rebbe is explaining here, everything fits perfectly. Okay, Sif Tazayin. If a yid bought the rights of the taxes, even if you know that the yid is adding a fee and he's collecting more than what he's supposed to be collecting according to the law, it's usher to evade paying what you're obligated to pay according to the main the basic legal obligation of taxes. Whatever the yid is adding on his own, that you don't have to pay. That's gazela. But what the yid is collecting on his own, what the yid is collecting, the rights that he bought to the king, that you have to pay. If he's adding an extra third, so you don't have to pay that extra third. To evade taxes is gazela. The yid who's collecting taxes, who bought the rights to collect the taxes, is also a gazlan. The king is only gave him a right to collect, let's say, $1,000 worth of taxes, and he's coming and say, pay me $1,500 worth of taxes. So he is also a gazlan. You know, that's still from a gazlan. So therefore, the $1,000 that you have to pay according to the law, that you have to pay, the extra $500 that's stam gzeila, that you don't have to pay. But if he didn't buy the rights from the king, but he's a representative of the king, and then you find out that as a representative of the king, he's adding and he's charging more than what the law requires. And so to any regular Geisha tax collector who we assume until proven otherwise that he's adding for himself or his own pockets, then you don't have to pay any amount. Everything is gzeila. Why the whole taxes are based on Dina Demalchusa. Dina Demalchusa has to be a law, but here he's collecting not according to the law. Everything that he's taking is all gzeila. Because he didn't buy the rights for himself. He's coming as a representative of the king, as a shliach of the king, and he's collecting not according to the Dina Demalchusa, not according to the halacha, not according to the din. Shliach hamelech kamelech. והמלך שנטל שלא כדין המלכוס, כגון שהמד מחה שאין לה קיצwa, if the king is collecting taxes not according to the Dina Malchus, Harei a Gezel commission is bar l'mayla, that's all totally Gzela. The Av Zesh and Nitel Yitzrim Kitzis Amalach, Harei a Kamecha Shem Kitzon. So too this tax official who is taking more than what is required according to the law, that's all Gzela. Masha'en Kain Yisrael Shekona Mechas V'Gevei Le'atzmei Ve'en Shleach HaMelech Klal. Masha'en Kain, in the first case where we said that the Yid bought, he's not coming as a representative of the king. The king is out of the picture. He bought the rights for himself to collect taxes. But now what he comes and he adds, that doesn't take away from the main from the primary requirement of paying the king's taxes. What comes to the king, what belongs to the king, belongs to the king. And the king sold it to this yid. And the king's chelak is not diminished because this yid is taking more than what is right. Because the king is out of the picture and he's not involved in this collection anymore. When the king sold the rights to this yid, that was a clean sale. And this yid was zeiche. He earned the rights. He acquired the rights to collect these taxes. And now he's a Bal Chayv. And the money that the amount of taxes that you owe to him, alpi the Dina Demalchusa, alpi the Dina Malchus, Itake belongs to him illegitimately, and everything else is Gzeilah. Okay. With that, we'll end here. And yeah, for anyone listening, and in the schus of this learning, it says Shulchan Aruch Kashiyash Din Lamata in Din Lamayla, and shall be benched for a good bench the year, and continue Be'ezus Hashem at a future time. Shekayach.